Welcome to episode 3 of Ping, the Firewalls.com podcast, a bi-weekly look at cybersecurity, including top products, the latest trends, news, expert tips, and interviews with top security industry company representatives. I'm Kevin Baxter, and I'm joined by my Firewalls.com colleague, Andrew Harmon.
Hey, Andrew.
As we dive into a different featured topic each episode. New episodes of the podcast come out every other Wednesday, so subscribe or follow on your favorite podcasting platform to get the latest one. And feel free to leave a comment or email us at podcast@firewalls.com with feedback or questions. Now on to our featured topic and our guest for this episode. So we've made it to episode 3, and you're probably wondering, how can a podcast from Firewalls.com, with firewalls in the name, have managed not to do an episode on firewalls yet? Well, third time's the charm.
What exactly is a firewall? If you look it up on Google or Wikipedia, you'll find a definition like a network security system that monitors and controls incoming and outgoing network traffic based on security rules, or a barrier between a trusted internal network and an untrusted external one.
And that's a pretty reasonable and accurate definition, though it probably doesn't help someone just entering the market, as firewalls come in many shapes and sizes, as well as no shape or size at all. Your PC at home should have a software firewall pre-installed. There are web application firewalls. There are small desktop devices that can secure a home network with a few users. And there are huge rack-mounted firewall appliances that can secure an enterprise with thousands.
So if you're a small business owner or a network administrator, what should you be looking for? And where do you start?
To help you learn about one of the top firewall solutions on the market that has options covering a wide range of network needs, the Sophos XG Firewall, it's time to introduce our guest. So to help you learn about one of the top firewall solutions on the market that has options covering a wide range of network needs, the Sophos XG Firewall, it's time to introduce our guest. Today we welcome Chris McCormack, a Senior Product Marketing Manager with Sophos Network Security. Chris, thanks very much for joining us today.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we'll start for small business owners who are just dipping their toes into the cybersecurity space. Can you give a general explanation of why they should be in the market for a firewall?
If you really simplify it down, let's face it, a firewall has a couple of major jobs it needs to do. First, it's typically the heart of your network, providing connectivity for all your IT infrastructure, connecting you to the internet, allowing VPN access and all that kind of stuff. So it's essentially providing all the network connectivity and access for your organization. So that's its first major job. Secondly, it has to provide protection and security for your organization. By that, I mean it really should be doing 3 things. It should be providing visibility and control over all the activity on your network, so you know what users are doing, what applications are running, what traffic activity is going on, and hopefully help you identify risks, get them under control so you can put policies in place before they become a problem. And so features on a firewall like dashboarding, reporting, and then web policies, app control, and of course user authentication all fall into this sort of area of providing visibility and control. It needs to prevent hacks, attacks, and malware from getting onto your network, keeping those bad guys and bad stuff out of there. And that's where technologies like traditional firewalling, as well as next-gen technologies like intrusion prevention, become important. And then the last feature you need in a firewall, or what you should be considering, is your firewall needs to act as a trusted enforcement point. So if a threat does get on your network, what happens? Is the firewall going to help you contain it? Can it block the threat from getting out? Can it block it from moving around on your network? It's an important consideration. And unfortunately, when you add all this up, you'll find that not all firewalls are created equal. For example, a lot of firewalls don't offer that kind of automated response to a threat. and many of them differ in how easy they are to manage, the types of protection they provide, and it's quite a challenge trying to shop for a firewall these days, guys.
When you're going out and talking to small businesses and small office customers, what features are they typically looking for in a network security setup?
Small businesses often have slightly different needs from larger ones. For example, small business owners or IT managers really want to try and consolidate, simplify, save money as much as they can on their network security while still protecting themselves, because let's face it, small businesses are facing the same threats that large enterprises are. A devastating ransomware attack can impact a small business just as much as it can a big one. So small organizations want top-shelf, enterprise-grade protection, but they also want integration and simple management. They don't want that complexity that comes with enterprise-grade products. They want all-in-one protection, ideally providing everything they need in one appliance like a firewall, a next-gen firewall, web filtering, app control, email protection, maybe even a web application firewall. And they also want great reporting and visibility without having to buy an extra product just to see what's going on their network. And so with XG Firewall, we've put a lot of consideration into the needs of small businesses. We've really been focused on their particular needs, offering all of those features that they need in one appliance, from our smallest entry-level unit all the way up to our high-end products. So you don't need to compromise on features if you're a smaller business. I guess another important criteria for businesses of any size really is management complexity. We have really focused on making it easy to manage our firewall, but not only that, you can manage all of your Sophos IT products, your endpoint, your email, your firewall, all together in Sophos Central, which is our cloud management platform that's really been designed for the average person to be able to manage their IT security.
And, speaking of that, you mentioned it can be kind of a daunting process for somebody entering this market and looking for the right firewall for them. And you mentioned the XG Firewall has a really good feature set for smaller business customers and even larger businesses. But how do they know which one to choose? I mean, you've got like your entry-level desktop models, and they get bigger and bigger as well.
You're right. There's really a plethora of models designed to provide great protection at pretty much every price point. With XG Firewall, as I mentioned, every model from our entry level to our high end comes with the exact same protection capabilities. So you don't need to worry about, if I buy this entry level device because my network is small, you don't need to worry about compromising on features. What separates the different models is really the network capacity and performance, and I guess to some extent the connectivity options. So someone with a small network and a few users really only needs to buy as much hardware as they need to secure their network, and then a larger enterprise can buy a monster appliance with dozens of ports to satisfy, their very demanding network. So I guess when shopping for an XG Firewall, you want to look at your network capacity, the number of connections you're currently handling, the bandwidth requirements. What connectivity needs do you have on the wide area network side or your ISP side, as well as what connectivity options you need for your internal network and Wi-Fi. What kind of Wi-Fi needs do you have? And other considerations are branch offices. How many offices do you need to connect together? We have special low-cost, affordable devices to help you connect your remote branch offices. So there's lots of different products. It can be a bit dizzying to sort through them all, but we have sales engineers and our great partner community that can help any customer get right-sized appliance for their network.
XG firewalls come in both wired and wireless versions. What are some of the benefits of a wireless deployment for XG firewalls?
Our wireless models come with integrated Wi-Fi access points that offer full 802.11 AC, the latest wireless standard, for both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz wireless radios with a variety of MIMO options. So you can really get a wireless solution built into your firewall, which is ideal for small businesses where your firewall may be sitting on a shelf in the back room serving a small office. But we also have some wireless access points that are available separately, that you can deploy and mount on ceilings, mount on walls, wherever they happen to be needed. And you can really provide extensive extensive coverage for a much larger organization with a variety of our wireless access points. And whether they're built in or whether they are separate, they're all managed right from within your XG firewall. We have a full wireless controller built right in. There's a couple of interesting other things I want to point out with wireless, and that is not only are people looking for wireless connectivity inside their organization these days, but some are looking to use cellular or LTE as a connectivity option for their internet connection, especially as a backup. In some cases, organizations who are super reliant on the internet want to have a backup ISP connection so that if their primary goes down or has a brownout, the firewall will automatically fail over and use the secondary connection. And in many cases, organizations are looking to use LTE for that secondary connection. It's much more robust in the case of a disaster. And so they're taking advantage of a feature we have in our 125 and 135 models where you can actually just plug in an LTE modem and it will allow you to put in a SIM card and you can connect to the LTE network right from your firewall.
Also, kind of talking about the XG Firewall model line, we were talking about physical appliances, but there are also some other options. You have software, virtual, and Azure cloud-based versions as well. So what are the differences between those options?
Sophos has really been a leader right from the start in providing support for various virtual and cloud environments as well as bring your own hardware type of solutions. So you can install XG Firewall, for example, as a software appliance on any x86 hardware platform that you might have. If you have an old server that's been sitting in the back that you want to repurpose as a firewall product, you could do that. If it has a couple of NICs, you can load XG Firewall on there and turn it into a firewall. And then we also support all the popular virtualization platforms, Hyper-V, Citrix, VMware, KVM. And of course, we are in the Microsoft Azure public cloud marketplace. So you can load up a firewall in Azure in literally a couple of minutes. And you can use their pay-as-you-go licensing model, or you can bring your own more traditional license to Azure and deploy that way. And that's great for organizations who are starting to put some infrastructure in the cloud. And we are also bringing XG Firewall early next year to Amazon Web Services, which will be a welcome addition to the family.
Yeah, that leaves a lot of convenience and flexibility for businesses, which sort of highlights a phrase that we spouted on the XG Firewall website. It's a firewall that thinks like you, so you don't need to think like a firewall. How does that make security easier for a business?
Yeah, that's a good one. A great way of putting it, I think. Let's face it, if you know anything about Sophos, it is that we have a long track record, really, of really being focused on trying to simplify IT security to make it easier for the average IT admin or even a regular guy like me to be able to get the most out of the product. And so with XG Firewall, we had a rather unique opportunity when we launched it a few years ago to go with a clean slate approach and see how we could approach certain management tasks in a new and simpler way than maybe firewalls that have been on the market for decades were doing it. And they're just constantly bolting on new technology and adding new features without really considering, is there a better way to do this? And so one area we really focused on was simplifying the way you protect your network. So most products, if you're familiar with a firewall and you've used one before, you know that you're jumping around to probably 7 or 8 or even more different parts of the product to set up your protection, your firewall rules, web policies, app control, IPS, Ssl Inspection, and NAT. These are all things you need to do in your firewall. And let's face it, in traditional firewall products, you are doing those in separate areas of the product. And so it becomes a chore. It becomes really complicated. The chances of something being done incorrectly when you're jumping around like that becomes greater. And you really have no place you can go in the firewall to really see the protection you're applying to any particular user group or traffic. So if Joe calls up one of your users and says, hey, I can't access this, where do you start? Do you start in the web area? Is it an SSL problem? Do you even know what protection is being applied to Joe? It's a nightmare. There's just no one place you can go to start troubleshooting or even understand what your security posture is. So we took this problem on head on, and there is a better way to do these kinds of things now. And so we radically changed the way you manage protection by putting everything together, all of that stuff I talked about, web, app control, traffic shaping, IPS, SSL, NAT, all of that together in one place, in one screen, so you can see exactly what policies, controls, and protection are being applied for any given type of traffic. Snap in policies for all these things using our prepackaged policies. You can customize them there right in that place on that screen without having to leave and jump around in the product. And more importantly, you can see your entire security posture for any given firewall rule, any given user or group or traffic matching criteria, all together in one place on one screen. And that really makes it so much easier and more intuitive. People who switch over from other firewalls and come to XG just are blown away at how much more intuitive it is to manage their protection.
So one of the most probably unique and exciting aspects of XG firewalls to me is the security heartbeat. So could you describe a little bit how XG firewalls connect through this heartbeat to endpoint protection such as Intercept X?
I mentioned earlier that one of the key tasks a firewall has to provide is really that trusted enforcement point. When there is a threat on the network, how is your firewall helping? How is it helping prevent it from spreading, contain it, moving laterally, or stealing data? Now, unfortunately, most firewalls out there are really powerless to respond in that kind of situation because they don't have any relationship or communication with the rest of the entities on the network, like the endpoints. And that's really the beauty of having both your firewall and your endpoints from Sophos, is that we have integrated them to provide what we call synchronized security, or security heartbeat is just one feature of that. And it literally enables the endpoint and the firewall to communicate. It synchronizes their communication so that if an endpoint running Intercept X detects a threat, it can let the firewall know instantly. The firewall can then isolate that endpoint on the network, and it does that in a couple of ways. So first, you can use endpoint health status in your firewall rules so that if the health changes, the firewall rule dynamically changes as well. And so when an endpoint is no longer healthy, its access to certain network resources, whether it's the internet, servers, or other segments of the network, can be automatically cut off, which will help it from spreading or reaching out. The other aspect of this is we've recently introduced what we call lateral movement protection. So in many networks, a lot of endpoints are connected together on the same switch, where the firewall has really no ability to cut off endpoints because they're all just connected through the switch. So this new feature, lateral movement protection, has the firewall informing all the healthy endpoints on the network that, hey, one of your peers has a threat, be aware. And what that does is the healthy endpoints will stop accepting any traffic from the infected host, essentially protecting themselves. And so it's an amazingly simple solution to a very complex and challenging problem. And it's really only possible thanks to the integration between our endpoint and our firewall to implement, as you say, the security heartbeat feature.
Talking about endpoint, how has the introduction of EDR capabilities enhanced the security of the XG firewall?
EDR is really exciting because it stands for endpoint detection and response, and it really brings what was formerly an enterprise product suite requiring really literally multiple security analysts and specialists to manage, down to businesses of any size now, enabling them to tap into this enormously helpful area without the need for security experts. And so it enables organizations to utilize our industry-leading deep learning and artificial intelligence technology to identify if they have any potential threats lurking on their network. And it provides a guided response on how to react and literally take care of this problem or this potential threat in your network with a click of a button. And so we are introducing the same deep learning and threat intelligence technology that is in our EDR platform into the firewall this fall in our upcoming version 18 release that will provide that same level of threat analysis on files as they enter the network to stop the latest zero-day threats, maybe that hasn't been seen before. This is what this threat intelligence and deep learning technology can do, is it can identify the latest threats, and we're going to start implementing that right at the firewall at the gateway. So it's not going to consume any performance because the analysis is actually done all in the cloud by our Sophos Labs threat research infrastructure. And it is a great new capability that you will now be able to have both on your endpoint, looking for threats on the network that may be already there, as well as at your firewall to prevent those kinds of threats from getting on the network in the first place. I really encourage everyone out there to be looking into these technologies because, as we know, the threat landscape is getting more and more sophisticated every day, and hackers are coming up with incredible techniques to make their malware unique, bespoke, customized for every given situation, making it increasingly difficult to detect unless you have this kind of technology working for you.
And so how does XG Firewall specifically address stuff like unknown threats and 0 days and even malware cocktails?
Yeah, that's a good follow-on question. I mean, as I said, the threat landscape is getting so sophisticated. Hackers are getting very innovative at getting past especially traditional defenses. So there's really a couple of essential technologies I think you really need these days, and I touched on one of them a moment ago, but I really want to focus on another one, which is sandboxing. Now, the best way to identify a threat in many cases is, of course, to catch it red-handed. But, of course, you don't want to be doing that on your own network. And that's why there is sandboxing. What that does is it sends files with any active code or content into the cloud sandbox. At Sophos, we call it Sandstorm. And we have infrastructure in the cloud that spins up virtual machines that will then execute this file and observe it and watch, see what it does. So the file's executed, we monitor it often for several minutes to see what it does, and the sandbox is looking at obvious behaviors, like is it encrypting files like a ransomware would, or is it starting to load suspicious or malicious content into memory? We look at network activity, memory usage, file system activity, and of course we have our own version of Intercept X running in the sandbox so it can detect any exploit that this file might try to be taking advantage of. So we watch it, we monitor it, we even can detect if hackers are getting savvy these days, so they try to detect if they're running in a sandbox and then don't reveal themselves. We can even detect them trying to do that. So it is a great way to expose a threat and convict it in a safe way that's not on your network. Any files coming in that are suspicious, you could flag them to go to the sandbox. It's not tapping any performance on your firewall. Again, it's all running in the cloud. And this is fabulous technology for revealing the latest threats, because they could do whatever they want to try and get past your defenses. But at the end of the day, if they're going to do something malicious or nasty, we're going to see it, and we're going to catch it, and we're going to block it.
And you mentioned earlier relating to not having to think like a firewall, some of the ease of management, but just to expand on that a little bit more, what are some aspects of the XG Firewall control center that make that firewall easier to manage for small businesses that may not have the time, the budget, staff, expertise, et cetera, to manage their network security?
Making your firewall easy to use means surfacing important information that you need to know what's going on. And so for those of you who may not be familiar with XG Firewall, the control center is what you see as soon as you log into the product. It really is the main dashboard, if you like. And the control center is made up of different widgets that display status information and that you can click through and drill down into right from the control center. And it offers a rich overview of pretty much everything that's going on in your network. And it uses traffic light style indicators, going back to how do we make this think like you. Green means it's good. You don't need to worry about it. Yellow means it probably needs your attention at some point, but it's not urgent. Red means you better look into this as soon as possible. So you've got all of this information on the control center that can bring any risk on your network to your attention immediately. So it's looking at your top risk users, downloads, and suspicious files that have been brought onto the network. If there's any threats on your network, God forbid, you'll see that in red right away. Any policy violations that are going on. Is anyone using shadow IT in your organization? That will be visible on there as well. And of course, things like traffic utilization and the firewall resource utilization are all present there as well. It's interesting because we continue to enhance this all the time. With version 18 coming this fall, we're adding a new widget, and this is going to be a real game changer, I think. It's for encrypted traffic, and we all know that more and more of the traffic on the internet is encrypted. I think it's something like 80% now and continuing to climb. And Ssl Inspection is really important in order to have a view of what's going on in that encrypted traffic that's coming into your network. We're adding a new packet processing engine in version 18 that will not only dramatically improve the performance of Ssl Inspection, but also offers very flexible policy tools on how to manage your SSL inspection. And where I was going with this is one of the key new capabilities of this feature is a new widget on the control center that will allow you to see at a glance if you have any SSL inspection errors, how much traffic you're processing that's encrypted. And with just one click, you can see the source and user that may be affected by an SSL issue and take one click really to resolve it. And so no one else in the industry that we're aware of is doing anything like this with SSL inspection, which is, as I said, become super important, where they're surfacing the errors and issues that are popping up as users surf to some website that may not support SSL decrypt. We'll flag that so that you can add an exception or continue to block it based on your policy. The control center is definitely a strong selling point for XG. We have started from a clean slate, asked ourselves what important information do admins need to see. We put that all on the control center, making it super easy for you to understand what's going on in your network at a glance.
So at Firewalls.com, we always recommend people shopping for firewalls that you never just buy an appliance-only unit and pretty much stop there. What additional security services and suites provide more holistic security approach?
Right. So in addition to your hardware purchase, with Sophos, we have very modular security options. So you buy only the protection you really need. You don't have to pay for anything extra. And you get many things at no extra cost, such as reporting. We include a full suite of reporting in our firewalls at no extra cost. So that comes along for the ride. For the modular protection, you can buy just network protection if you want just a next-gen firewall with IPS. You can buy web and app control if you want to get a handle on apps and websites in your organization. So that's probably the most popular license combination is the network and web and app control, which is really the fundamentals of a true next-gen firewall. And of course, with the new zero-day protection I talked about, our sandboxing and threat intelligence analysis is another license that people are adding just to get that zero-day protection. And then we also have email and web application firewall modules. So you can really customize your protection anywhere from a next-gen firewall really to a full UTM solution. On top of the protection you buy on the appliance, we're also able to offer a full suite of IT security products like InterceptX. We talked about the benefits of having that on your network earlier with the integration of the firewall on our endpoint. Of course, you can manage all of our Sophos products from Sophos Central, which is our cloud-based management platform. But it doesn't stop there. You also get the full backing of our Sophos Labs threat research and machine learning labs. So they're working for you 24/7 around the world to stay ahead of the latest threats. And then we're just in the process of launching a new managed threat response service where we have a highly trained team of security specialists at Sophos that will actually monitor your network and do proactive threat hunting and analysis, and then take care of any threats that are discovered all on your behalf. So you can really take a hands-off approach to managing the security of your network and leave it to our highly trained team of experts. And so we're 1 month into the early access program for that service, and it's already a wild success. There's lots of instances where we've helped a number of customers identify and remediate active threats on their network. So with Sophos, you not only buying a box, you're buying a full suite of protection, the backing of Sophos Labs, the central management capability from the cloud, and optionally, you can even get our threat response service as well.
So when people are doing their research on any type of purchase, they usually like to look at independent tests as well. So how is XG Firewall done in those scenarios? I know just anecdotally, I've seen a few awards pop up here and there.
Yes, it's quite nice to get that kind of recognition, and we've always placed quite well on independent tests, which is very fortunate. We have a lot of respect for NSS Labs, as I'm sure many of you. They do great work. They are very rigorous, and they do a lot of very thorough, rigorous testing every year on all the firewall platforms out there on the market. And they like to keep the target moving to keep everyone on their toes, which is a good thing. But we've been recommended by NSS with a strong showing each of the last few years that we've participated, which is great. So I highly recommend considering NSS when you're shopping for a firewall. And then we also continue to win a number of innovation awards. And this is really a result of the fact that we're doing a lot of innovative stuff that other firewall vendors are not. We talked about some of those, like the synchronized security and the security heartbeat features, the endpoint integration. You know, our focus on simplifying security management, we talked about that. And I think we're going to get some further awards, if I can be so bold to say that this year with the new Ssl Inspection performance and transparency I touched on earlier, we're doing some very unique things there with the technology we've got in that area. So expect to see more of those kinds of awards. And then Gartner, if you follow them, they just published their annual Magic Quadrant. And as we all know, Gartner are really more focused up market, Fortune 1000 enterprise level, but they really praise Sophos for our focus on being responsive to the needs of small and mid enterprise organizations, which is really nice to see them say that. Because let's face it, the needs of small and mid organizations are different, as we discussed, and often ignored by some vendors. So it's good to see that Gartner recognized we're really focused on that segment. But I'll be honest, we're really just getting started here. So hopefully we'll see more accolades roll in as we continue moving forward.
Well, hopefully this whole discussion has interested some people in checking out XG Firewall for themselves. Is there anywhere you recommend where people could go, like, test drive the product before a purchase?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a free 30-day trial available on the Sophos website. So you can download a virtual or software appliance and deploy it on your own hardware, deploy it in a VM, and easily port your configuration over from your VM to your hardware appliance if you decide to buy, so that you can easily just make a backup of your config and restore it to your purchased appliance when you decide to go that route, which makes it super easy to get up and running. If you just want to see what it can do without having to deploy anything, there is a live demo environment that's set up in Azure, and you can access that from our website as well. That'll let you fully explore all the user interface and all the features, and that way you can make a good judgment as to whether it'll be a good fit for you. And then I'm not sure many people are aware of this, but we also offer a free home use version of XG Firewall that you can download and put on an old PC that you may have and use it to protect your home network for free. And it's going to be much better than any home router you can find out there. So that's another option for people to explore it. And a lot of our corporate customers, their IT admins are all using XG at home as well for free.
We mentioned the fact that there's a lot of research to be done, and certainly a test drive is a great way to learn more. But how about some other backup reading materials, things like that, that people might want to find? Where can they get those?
I suggest you head over to Sophos.com/XG Firewall. You can check out all the information available there. In particular, we have a buyer's guide for firewalls that's very helpful in sort of listing all of the capabilities you should be looking for in a modern firewall. And it even goes into a comparison of what vendors have what features so that you can make a short list from that document. So it's a really helpful tool for getting started on a new firewall purchase. And if you're really keen to learn more about XG Firewall, of course, you'll find a bunch of information there as well. But I also recommend you check out our support section of the Sophos.com website, because we have a ton of helpful information on the support section, how-to videos that will walk you through, how easy it is to use most of the features on XG. There's a full set of documentation there, including online documentation, and you'll find a very active, vibrant community of customers and partners there on the forums that you can participate in, ask questions of, and get fully immersed. So I would strongly recommend you head over to Sophos.com and enjoy everything that we have to offer over there.
And just jumping back, one last question. We talked about management. We talked a little bit about deployment as well. How easy is this to deploy for somebody who may be a little intimidated by the whole idea of setting up a firewall on their network?
Let's face it, firewalls are deep and complicated products, and certainly setting one up could be a very intimidating proposition. And so we, again, have taken this opportunity to really simplify the setup of your firewall with XG. So you can literally be up and running in about 5 minutes from the time you plug it in to the time you're surfing the web fully protected. And it can be done even by an average guy like me. You don't need to be a security specialist or a networking guru to do this. There's a really nice setup wizard that'll walk you through every step of the setup process. When you first turn it on, it pops up, and it really takes about 5 minutes. And then at that point, you have some basic firewall rules in place, and you're good to go. And you can, of course, then fully customize and add more rules depending on the needs of your network. You can take advantage of many of our prepackaged policies. For example, we have a web policy built in called Default Workplace Policy, and that will simply block all of the normally unwanted and malicious URLs that an organization would want to block. So with a couple of clicks, you can be protecting your network from unwanted content. And we also have built-in policies for like SIPA for schools, so that you can be literally compliant with SIPA web policies if you're a school within a couple of clicks. So start with one of these prepackaged policies and then quickly and easily customize them for your specific needs. And these kinds of policies are available for web, as we just talked about, app control, IPS policies, traffic shaping. It makes it super easy to get up and running quickly by just snapping in prepackaged policies and making a few tweaks to them.
Chris, thank you very much for joining us today on the podcast.
Well, thank you guys very much for the opportunity to join you and talk about my favorite subject, XG Firewall.
We appreciate it. And to learn more about XG Firewall and the other Sophos products out there, search Sophos on our blog at firewalls.com/blog. That's SOPHOS in the search bar. And you can find the Sophos products right for you on our website at firewalls.com. And now it's time for headlines. In this regular segment, we discuss a few top news stories in the network security world and what they may mean to you. Let's jump into headline number 1. So cyber insurance companies that encourage ransomware victims to give in to the demands of hackers and pay for decryption keys are making the problem of file locking malware attacks much worse in the long run, according to cybersecurity experts. Andrew, basically, the crux of it is cyber insurance payouts are adding to the problem of ransomware, according to some of the experts out there.
Yeah, and ransomware is definitely sort of the big push in the cybercrime world and over the last couple of years. And this is when they lock up your files and they say, we'll delete them and never give them back to you unless you pay us X amount of dollars, usually through Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency like that.
Yeah, jumping onto the dark web to make the payoff. So ransomware is kind of lumped in with other malware, using a type of malware to then get a payout from whoever the victim may be.
Yeah, sort of like data kidnapping.
Yeah. That's ransom, right?
Yeah.
Mel Gibson? Anybody? No? The piece is in ZDNet, and it notes that ransomware attacks are on the rise this year, with local governments in the U.S. particularly susceptible. In fact, we've seen during the year that a few local governments have paid the ransom, judging that the cost of trying to work around the malware that locks up their files, whether it's restoring backups or hiring resources to unlock the files, would be greater than simply paying, even though that ransom can be pretty pricey.
And there's an understandable argument from their viewpoint where basically they want to get things back to normal and back up and running as quickly as possible and with as little fuss and, workarounds as possible.
Basically saying, you got me, and we'll just take care of this and move on. But what's interesting is actually hearing that cyber insurance companies are in that same camp, really, as the victims who think, oh, let's just move on. Cyber insurance companies know that maybe the costs of recovery in the more traditional sense that don't involve paying off this ransom, they're hard to quantify necessarily, and they may end up being more for the insurance company.
Yeah, and just like so many other things in life, this article kind of points out that the cheapest option is not always necessarily the best option. If you're looking for quick fixes and the path of least resistance, that also can have some snowballing effects, which sort of makes the problems more complicated later on down the road for everybody involved.
Right. So you pay off the ransom, then you're giving the hackers what they want and encouraging them to do it again, most likely. There's also the whole thought process of they are criminals in the first place, so you pay them. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get exactly everything that you want out of the ransom. Or even if you do, maybe they know that you're going to pay, so they'll come right back at you again another time.
Yeah, and this does introduce a bit of a moral argument as well. At the end of the day, if you do make the ransom payment, you are contributing to cybercrime in some way. You're complicit in helping hackers' operations become better funded and more efficient in the future.
Right, and additionally, the other point that this article makes in relation to the cyber insurance side of things is these folks who are hacking into an organization have probably been sitting there observing it for a while and kind of know the ins and outs of what they offer. And so they are looking potentially even for these companies that have cyber insurance, knowing that the insurance companies may be even more likely than somebody who doesn't have this insurance to, be game for a payout.
And that may lead to a tipping point where having cyber insurance actually exposes you to greater risk than carrying no insurance whatsoever. So if attackers come to believe that companies with these insurance policies are easier targets and have a more guaranteed payout, then they'll probably start targeting them more readily. Most crime are crimes of opportunity, and this is sort of giving that opportunity directly to them.
Yeah, and we talked about a little bit ago, there have been a number of cases this year where we've seen like local governments, for instance, get hacked, like a city government or a county government, and they do end up going the idea, let's just pay and get it over with. But one of the people they talked to in this article, Teresa Payton, a former CIO with the White House, she says for these government victims, they may think, oh, tax dollars, we need to pay the least amount and just move on. But she's saying if you're a government victim, just tell your taxpayers what happened and explain we shouldn't be sending your tax dollars to a criminal somewhere. We may need to spend a little bit more, but we'll be doing the recovery above board and probably limiting our exposure in the future to another attack.
Yeah, and I think in most cases it's best to listen to experts in the field. So if experts are saying don't pay the ransom, those urging the businesses to pay are usually doing so because they have a profit-motivated decision-making process behind that.
And finally, there is the one other piece to remind people of. You want to try and put yourself in a position not to have ransomware infiltrating your systems to begin with.
Yeah, if you have available backups of your critical business infrastructure, that's probably the most effective way to combat ransomware in the first place, is don't become the victim and you won't have to make those decisions.
Yeah, you have all the security measures you need in place with your network, and then the backups in case something does happen. You'll be ready to quickly mobilize and not have to worry about that downtime or potential data loss.
Don't put yourself in a hard position if you don't have to.
And on to headline number 2. And this is an article, actually more of an opinion piece, something that provides some expert background into the cloud, called Behind the Data Breach, Understanding Cloud Security and Misconfigurations. You know, we talked about the cloud. The cloud was a main subject of our first episode, and you didn't think we'd leave it behind again here.
It's 2019. The cloud is here.
It's everywhere. So Dennis Lieber, Chief Information Security Officer in Kentucky, put together this piece, and he argues that many of the security breaches occurring today actually do involve cloud applications. He's stressing really the importance of familiarizing yourself with the shared responsibility models of all of those as-a-service providers you use, and they can help you identify the right configurations to maximize security.
Yeah, and if you follow Firewalls.com content anyway, you've probably seen that we routinely hammer on the idea that cybersecurity appliance misconfigurations are the number one cause of network breaches, and the same is true of cloud.
Right. Actually, he talks about the different types of cloud applications and services, pointing out that as you go down from software as a service to platform as a service to infrastructure as a service, that actually increases the security onus that's on you rather than on the service itself.
So on one end of the spectrum, you have fully on-premise services. So all the levels of responsibility in government fall directly on the organization operating them, whereas on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have things like software as a service, where you kind of rely on service level agreements and contracts to decide who's going to govern what, whose responsibility is in case of a breach or if anything goes wrong.
And really, I think there is this danger that I think we're moving in the right direction on this, but I think when people have initially, put some of their key infrastructure into these cloud environments, they do think that it's in the cloud, we're good to go.
Yeah, somebody else's job now.
Yeah, and not necessarily considering that security aspect of it, but if anything, you have to think about security even more, knowing that your vital data may be in a place that could get a little bit more exposed than if it's just housed in a hardened environment in a room in your main office.
Yeah, and a smart organization will tend to keep their own tabs on governance, even as a fallback. So even if you can trust your SaaS providers to be providing some level of security, you need to keep an eye on it as well.
Yeah, and that's what Lieber really says here, that the same care must be given to configuring your cloud presence that is given to your, local wide area networks, anything that you are doing in your own infrastructure hardware-wise beforehand. And going back to the misconfiguration thing, he actually cites one of the big data breaches of the year, which was that Capital One data breach, which you had, over 100 million credit card applications were exposed to a hacker. The Department of Justice specifically said the reason that the hacker was able to get in was a misconfigured firewall.
Yeah, and cybersecurity, hardware and software both are never just straight out of the box, plug it into the wall solution. You have to make changes to the default settings. You can't leave default credentials and passwords. You have to make changes to all of the security privilege levels. Probably don't trust the setup wizard. It's not actually magic like that.
Right. And the same applies to any of these as a service environments. They have their particular shared responsibility models, and they also do have some information there if you're willing to look for it to tell you what you should be trying to do security-wise to configure your particular environment in these as a service platforms. So make sure you think about that and make sure you have somebody who can handle that for you too. And don't just try and take that on alone if it's not something that, isn't necessarily in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, and a lot of the misconfigurations that end up leading to breaches are pretty common sense things that should have been changed. Both Equifax and Capital One exposures in the last couple of years were found to still be using default login credentials, so admin login and admin password. Usually, default configuration settings will leave ports open even when they're not in use, and this leads to unnecessary attack surface exposure.
Yeah, so it's really just all about examining your infrastructure and knowing that you need to customize it. It not only helps for security, but it helps for performance as well. And so, if you're a smaller business, you think, putting everything on the cloud, I don't have to worry about it, don't need to hire an IT person for my company. Well, maybe you don't need an IT person in your company, but you need somebody who you can work with who's an expert to really make sure that you get all your configurations set properly.
And long-term logging, reporting, and audits on your system are just as important of setting them up in the first place. So you should be able to maintain a strong security posture over time and be able to check in whenever you'd like to make sure that everything is healthy and efficiently running.
Right. You need visibility on everything that you're doing, or else you may unwittingly be exposed. You may have had something going on for quite a while and not even known about it. If you don't have those security resources, or even if you do, but you need to have them focus on other day-to-day aspects, at Firewalls.com, we have a security operations center full of network experts that really, this is what they do. They configure and they manage all of your network needs.
And with our managed security service, you do get quarterly health checks and firewall reviews so that you're always aware exactly where your security stands and what's changed and what you need to be looking for in the future.
And they make sure that really everything that you do is integrated. So, if you have some hardware solutions, you have some cloud solutions, you're doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, then all in one place, monitored, managed, configured properly.
Yeah, and all of our configurations are the results of one-on-one conversations to determine, what's unique to your network and what demands does your organization have. It's not taking it out of the box and hitting next until you're finished. It's an actual one-on-one human conversation about what you need to set up and configure.
Tell us what you need, and then we can do the rest. And now on to headline number 3. A researcher discovered that 15,000 private webcams can possibly be exploited. So it's a pretty self-explanatory headline. The follow-up is that many of these devices were found to be inside people's homes. The webcams in question are vulnerable to hackers for both access and manipulation, kind of reminiscent of that story we did in episode 1 talking about the Bluetooth speakers also being vulnerable. All comes back to our friend, the Internet of Things. Yeah,
and this is a wide range of webcams from multiple manufacturers and basically all around the globe in several different countries. So there's no one culprit we're eyeing here.
Many of them are deployed with lax security measures because the manufacturers who put these out there are not really focusing on the security. They're focusing on the functionality of the product. So our old friends in the IoT can be cameras, thermostats, garage door openers, speakers like we talked about earlier, all sorts of different things. And they're still exposed because they're on networks.
And the thing with the Internet of Things, the main culprit for vulnerabilities rests in basically the supply chain and product designs not really being concerned with security. So manufacturers they're looking to secure cheap parts that they can manufacture en masse. They're trying to make these easy for users to plug in and start using, and they're looking to lower costs.
Yeah, and there are so many versions of all of these devices now, so certainly quite a variety of quality and thought is put into the manufacture of these. There are certainly the high ends and then the lower end knockoffs that may be cheaper, but maybe those are even a little bit more dangerous than some of the other devices.
And these webcams weren't secured by firewalls or VPNs in any way. Basically, after initial setup is pretty minimal security-wise, and this shifts a lot of responsibility of security onto the consumers, and a majority of buyers of these webcams aren't exactly cybersecurity experts that may not even be aware that there are potential risks to be worried about.
Yeah, they just wanted to Skype with their daughter away at college or something. In this case, wanted to highlight kind of how this was found, because you may hear this term a lot, but white hat hacktivist or hacker, however you want to say it, that's somebody who is out there looking for these types of vulnerabilities, but using their powers for good instead of evil. And in this case, it was a hacktivist from WizCase. He discovered the vulnerabilities in these devices, and as you said, they were around the world. Some of them were in homes, some of them were at businesses, all sorts of different places, and accessible by anyone with an internet connection.
Yeah, and these vulnerabilities lead to a pretty wide range of uses beyond just simple snooping. Unethical companies could use camera feeds to spy on their competitors and steal intellectual property. Criminals could monitor the inside of homes to find the most opportunity for crimes like break-ins. And feeds can be modified or completely erased to alter the evidence of crimes.
Yeah, I read that part and it made me think of Mission Impossible or one of those types of films where you can cover your tracks by just getting in there and changing that security footage or getting rid of it altogether. So
meanwhile, you have a man coming down out of the ceiling.
Yep. It's definitely alarming, though, and, I know a lot of people who put masking tape or something over their cameras on their laptops or things like that, and, I guess that partially solves the problem.
And they do make pretty cheap, removable shutters that you can basically just tape right on to the webcam, and it has a little slider that goes back and forth, and when the camera's not in use, you block the lens, and that pretty effectively blinds any would-be snoopers.
But by the same token, you want to have a setup where they wouldn't be able to get to that camera in the first place. And so that's really just about having your network security set up and properly configured again, have a firewall in place, and make sure that, some of these webcams will have some ability to have some security settings, and don't forget about that. You get in there and make sure that you have the best security turned on.
And consumers just need to be aware in general that the security onus, as you say, kind of falls on them after setup. So as far as these security capabilities and settings changes are concerned, that's kind of on the end user to take care of.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake that we see a lot of people make is thinking that, this is from a reputable company. This is a good product. I'm sure it's secure. We don't have to worry about it. But you do have to worry about it, because you're also the one who bears the brunt of the problem if you actually do get breached in some way. I mean, and the company could potentially have something to answer for eventually, but you're the one who's affected by it right away.
Yeah, similar to our second headline, there is a bit of a chain of responsibility, but at the end of the day, the end users in control of exactly how responsible they are.
Yeah, so keep that in mind with all of your connected devices throughout your home, your business, wherever. Every little piece could potentially be that little back door to allow hackers to get into your network. Even if you have a lot of good security, if you haven't configured it properly and you have one of these little openings, then you're in danger.
Yeah, we're not trying to make people paranoid, but be a little paranoid.
Yeah, a little bit. Question everything. And that's it for headlines. Now time for our Engineer's Minute. At Firewalls.com, we're fortunate to have a team of certified network engineers who offer a variety of services for top security brands like firewall configurations, as we just mentioned, endpoint deployment, and expert support, to name a few.
And in our Engineers Minute, one of our experts will take a moment each episode to provide a tip or answer a question. And that's where you come in. Leave a question in the comments or email us at podcast@firewalls.com, and you just may get your question answered in a future episode.
For today's tip, we stay with the XG Firewall theme, as network engineer Alan Steady has an important reminder for how to maximize your security with your firewall.
The single most important configuration tip I have for you today is to implement the security features. Turn your security appliance into a firewall and not just a router. The Sophos XG OS leverages some extremely exciting and unique technologies with Synchronized Security. So my configuration tip to you is to use it. When implementing Synchronized Security, you're instantly increasing your visibility into the traffic and applications your users are interacting with. Synchronized Security also opens the door to more advanced policy creation, where we're actually able to enforce specific policies and access controls based on an individual or collection of endpoints' health. So through the implementation of Synchronized Security, we're elevating our network security and removing ourselves from being the low-hanging fruit, significantly reducing the threat of viruses, malware, and ransomware attacks. So I would definitely urge you to take advantage of the full technology suite made available to you as a Sophos customer.
To learn more about what our network engineers can do for your business, give us a call at 866-403-5305 or go to firewalls.com/services.
And thanks very much for joining us again on this episode of Ping, a Firewalls.com podcast. Subscribe or follow now to ensure you get the latest episodes as soon as they're available. And please do rate and review us wherever you listen to the podcast. Visit us at Firewalls.com for all your network security needs, and give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. For Andrew Harmon, I'm Kevin Baxter. We'll be back soon with another episode, but in the meantime, we remind you to get secure, stay secure.